Coming up on the Daily, as Donald Trump prepares to become president once again, why are the social media giants whispering sweet nothings in his ear? And what are his plans for them? Find out after this. Elon Musk and Donald Trump. Now, there's a bromance I didn't see coming. Of course, it was Elon Musk who reinstated the Twitter, or X, account of the 45th President of the United States. But he's certainly not the only tech bro making changes seemingly with one eye on the White House. Meta boss Mark Zuckerberg is another. Sweeping reforms to Facebook, Instagram and WhatsApp are coming, ostensibly in the name of free speech, but in reality, perhaps as much to do with the change in president. All this whilst the US government tries to ban TikTok. So why are the internet entrepreneurs so keen to keep Donald Trump on side? And what's the next president's interest in social media all about? Tom Clarke is our science and technology editor, Mickey Carroll, our science and tech reporter. Tom, let's start with Facebook boss Mark Zuckerberg. What on earth has he been up to?
It was kind of remarkable when he emerged in this video very early into the new year. You know, Gon's the sort of the trademark grey hoodie. He's got this gold chain now, designer T-shirts and a tan. You know, this is not the man we remember.
Mixed martial artist as well.
And he's gone for ultimate fighting in a big way. So he's gone through some kind of personal transformation. And it's important to say that does predate Donald Trump's election. It's important to say that that journey had begun. But yeah, he comes out and he announces that Meta is going to do away with content moderation on its platforms. What is that? So that's human beings. And Meta was the largest employer of content moderators that we know of. About 40,000 people, we think, in 90 different countries, 60 different languages, checking the factual accuracy and whether it met the community guidelines of Meta. Humans checking these posts. If they found a problem, they either put it further down a feed or they would remove it if it was deemed to be in breach. They're going to get rid of that. His argument was it had been too biased politically, but also it was leading too many users to get banned from the site. They wanted to get back to their roots in free speech, was how he put it. Also, they were going to tweak algorithms to make things that touched on certain topics. The ones he named were immigration and gender topics, more likely to be seen, and essentially depoliticize the kind of content moderation on the platform. Important to stress, though, they still will moderate using algorithms, electrical tools, and some content moderation teams, illegal content. So that's sort of child pornography, extreme violence, terrorism, that kind of stuff. They have a legal obligation to do that even in the US. Reading between the lines, though, it's widely seen that he's bending the knee to the incoming President Trump and MAGA America, effectively seeing which way the wind is blowing and knowing, was it a business decision or a personal one? We can, I think, infer he's a fairly shrewd businessman. This is something he needed to do.
Okay, so Mickey, but this isn't the end of all oversight of content on these platforms, we should hasten to add. I mean, but it will be incumbent not on third parties to do it, but on the community themselves. Explain.
Yes, so Meta's now going to follow a community notes principle. So it's very similar, or it's the same as what happens on X. So when Elon Musk came in, he implemented community notes there. And it's essentially the community moderating itself. So where they see what they see as disinformation or incorrect information, they will add their own notes and flag it to users themselves. But there's obviously problems there because, I mean, fact checkers spend entire days looking at things that they think are inaccurate and really researching and coming out with the truth. Whereas people with agendas, or even just people who aren't right, can also add these notes. And so you can end up with more misinformation on the platform, or definitely end up with more misinformation on the platform than you would have done with third-party fact-checkers.
And also, we don't yet know, if it's heavily community noted, does it go lower down your feed or does it just stay where it is? And the idea here being, if that contains misinformation, disinformation, you're still going to see it. People have done some research looking into this and they found that fact checkers get material off platforms faster than stuff through a community note system, and that things have often gone viral before they actually start getting sufficient engagement to then be noted and have corrections pointed out.
Isn't that the fault of the community, in inverted commas? I mean, I understand your point about speed, but look at Wikipedia.
Exactly, and that comes back to this, I think, the overarching question: does it really matter? Does it matter if you let the community take charge, you just go back to the real roots of the internet that Mark Zuckerberg was talking about when it was this unpoliced Wild West, leave it up to the community to decide. On one hand, you could say, well, no, it doesn't really, because look back at UK newspapers. They have political leanings. People read the news they want. They go to these platforms. So if we see what a lot of people predict, and we've seen this with Twitter, people leaving for other platforms that sort of more align with their political views, we're in these different silos. That might not be a bad thing. But with social media, there's another thing going on, and I think we've seen this with platforms like X, that the community itself, or possibly the algorithm of the app itself, seems to be somehow prioritising certain types of content over others. And we've certainly, there's been academic analysis of how political views get amplified on social media, and it does seem there is decent evidence to suggest X has become more right-leaning, with more of those views being expressed and the opinions of others being downplayed. Is that naturally because of the user base, because of the people on there, or is it something about how the owners of those platforms can manipulate those algorithms? So that might distort discourse.
I mean, Mickey, does this mean then that on WhatsApp, Facebook, Insta, that it's going to be a complete free-for-all?
So there are still community guidelines. There are still rules about things that you can and can't say. But on the same day that Mark Zuckerberg announced that fact-checkers would be going, the company updated their guidelines as well to expressly put in some things that you can now say on their platform. So you can now, according to Meta's guidelines, call someone who is LGBT plus mentally ill. You can say that a woman is your property. You can insult someone's appearance because they have a serious disease. You can say that you hate someone because of their belonging to a protected group. So there are now express things that you can say on these platforms that previously you couldn't. And I was speaking to Stonewall, which is the UK's biggest LGBT charity. I was speaking to them when these guidelines got updated. And they're really worried because if someone like Meta says, OK, you can now say all this stuff online, they're really worried that this is going to lead to a lot more in-person or real-world abuse of marginalised groups.
In the US, this is a particular challenge legally because the First Amendment gives rights to free speech. It's very difficult for the courts to intervene in those sorts of areas. But even here in the UK and in Europe, where we're trying to draw up legislation to regulate what is allowed and not allowed online, there's this big debate about what's called legal but harmful content. You know, an opinion that might be legally valid, it's your right to have that opinion in free speech, but it harms another or puts another at risk of harm, as Mickey was just saying. But it's a concerning situation, I'd say more so in America than here.
Let's just think then, just for a second, Tom, about this relationship. I mean, we know, and we'll be discussing it later, Donald Trump and Elon Musk are very much in each other's pockets. I mean, do you think that Zuckerberg is looking for a similar sort of relationship with this White House, given what he has said in the past and what Trump has said about him?
It's really difficult to tell with Mark Zuckerberg in a way, because you look back on the history of his life, his political opinions, and those of his wife. They did a lot of philanthropy together. Their foundations give a lot of money away. They were very much to sort of liberal causes, you know, helping illegal immigrants in the US get work visas, looking after childhood health, teetering on reproductive health. They've sort of moved away from that. Is this political or ideological, or is it just business? And I think probably the coolest now to be it's business. He just needs to make sure he is on as close to the right side of Donald Trump as he can get, whether they could ever fully rehabilitate the relationship. It's about allowing Meta to continue to exist and be the dominant player in social media in the US in the face of Donald Trump and Elon Musk sharing the hill. But I think it gets more complicated than that. So you look at X and the power that Elon Musk now has, being close to the president. You know, he has, it's clear, an ideology about what the internet and social media should be for. It's often refers to it as the town square, where free speech stands. It is up to the community to regulate, and if you've got a problem with what somebody says, you can sue them. You know, but it's not for my platform to decide what you should or shouldn't say. When it comes to Donald Trump, on the other hand, I don't think, and there's nothing he's ever said that gives me to believe that he has an ideology about anything in particular. I think all he sees this as an opportunity to have platforms that essentially align with his political view, and the idea that he can enter into effectively fact-free discourse and debate in America. And that's the really concerning thing, because that's what autocrats do. And I think that's the more concerning bit, is how the politicization of platforms without any form of moderation might take America.
Mickey, explain exactly what is going on with TikTok in the United States, because, of course, this isn't happening on Donald Trump's watch. This is happening under Joe Biden.
So as it stands at the moment, on Sunday, one day before Donald Trump's inauguration, TikTok will be banned in the US unless ByteDance sells to a company in the US.
What's the concern?
The concern is around data. So ByteDance is a Chinese company. TikTok isn't headquartered in China and says that its data isn't stored on Chinese soil. But the US is really worried that data is being gathered about its citizens and stored by a foreign power that it considers hostile. On Friday, there was a Supreme Court hearing where Justice Brett Kavanaugh said that he was really concerned that the Chinese were going to take data about people who are currently teenagers in the US who might become CIA agents and then use it against them in the future.
But hasn't Facebook been doing that for donkey's years?
But Facebook isn't in China. It's the key thing here. But there's a chance this might not happen. There's a Supreme Court hearing this week which might overturn it.
Mickey, we all remember Donald Trump's opposition to TikTok for a long time. So why has he suddenly become a convert?
I mean, it's the ultimate flip-flop, isn't it?
Yeah.
In 2020, he wanted to ban it. He told reporters it was going to be banned in the US.
Yeah.
Fast forward 4 years, he's now got 14.7 million followers.
Is it that simple, that this is another platform on which he can operate?
Maybe it's about free speech. Maybe it's about all of the kind of the rights that he really wants to protect. But during the US election, TikTok was a huge part of his campaign. He's credited it with part of the success of him winning the presidency. He's also got some billionaire mates who have got a lot of interests in TikTok, and so he could benefit that way as well. And they've been donating to the Republican Party. So if you want to be cynical about it, he's massive on TikTok and he's got financial interests. So kind of course he would want to protect it.
I understand that these tech bros are motivated mostly by their fiduciary duty to their shareholders, ultimately to the dollars and cents that we've already mentioned. So how much power, how much sway does Donald Trump really have over them?
I think that's like the most interesting thing about this whole episode is for years, American big tech has done exactly what it's wanted to do without
resisted
of
Congress, resisted
intervention.
president.
They were just too powerful. They were also idealists. They had followings. You look at how people put Apple's Steve Jobs on a pedestal. Mark Zuckerberg, although a lot of liberals didn't particularly like his wealth very much, his political views aligned with them. They saw these as people that they could do business with and they liked and they supported. Now we see a real shift. There is the environment around big tech is changing. Let us not forget, the US Congress, it'd be interesting to see what happens under Trump, was working on several pieces of legislation to try and make social media companies more responsible for the content that goes online. Because American parents, just like British ones and European ones, are sick of their children being put into harm or danger by what they're seeing on the internet and on their phones. But also changes to the law to make it easier to prosecute and fine social media companies, which they were protected from previously. They've got an even stronger battle with that in Europe. If they can somehow get the American administration on side, try and get America to be more light touch, could that help them in their fight to resist legislation and the control that's trying to be put on them in their global market? So there's a big shift in the way that we view and regulate these big social media companies. I think we're seeing that play out as well, independent of the influence of Trump and Musk.
Thanks, guys. Quick pause, but right after, we will be talking Twitter. Elon Musk is now part of Team Trump, but to what end? Back in a sec. Tom and Mickey are still here as we turn our attention to Elon Musk and Twitter. Musk really did get in on the ground floor with Donald Trump, didn't he? But those free speech changes to Twitter, to X, those predate their bromance.
Trump was obviously banned from a lot of social media platforms and was brought back to X kind of once Elon Musk was back in power. So you can see immediately kind of the benefit to both of them there. But X has changed dramatically since
we're
this
still on it, though,
began.
aren't we? Sky News is an organisation.
Yeah. I mean, it's still got a huge community, and people may be leaving. They tend to be making new accounts elsewhere, not necessarily deleting their old accounts on X. So it'll be interesting to see how much people actually vote with their feet. Because, I mean, social media networks work when they've got a critical mass of people. If you go and set up a new social media network and there's only 5 of you on there, you're going to leave again. And so these changes may really upset people, or they may make our social media experiences worse, but I'm not entirely convinced that people will want to go to a really niche network where none of their mates are. They'd rather stick around for a slightly worse experience on X or Meta platforms.
It does feel then, given this lack of moderation, given this lack of fact-checking, that we are entering into this kind of post-truth world that we've heard about from before. It happened back the last time Donald Trump was in the White House. You looked at what he said and you took everything that was coming out from his prodigious social media output with a cellar of salt.
Yeah, I mean, like you say, we've been worrying about this since 2016, maybe even a bit before that. I don't think it's necessarily only arriving now. I think the problem of lies on the internet has been around since then and a bit before. I think what's happening now is that with Meta's changes and kind of what's happening on X, all of that, it's just sort of solidifying that maybe. I think it then puts the onus on people like journalists and independent fact-checking groups, even if they're not associated with these platforms, to just make sure that the truth can also break through.
Should we be scared about using social media in this Trump era, Tom?
I don't think we should be scared, but I think it's going to be interesting to see how all this pans out. It could be entirely self-regulating. There could be a point where it just literally becomes so awash with borderline violence, extremist content, headlines that are so ludicrous, even the National Enquirer wouldn't touch them. The fake news is so great. And people think, I'm getting bored of this, and it gradually self-corrects. And actually, we end up truly with what I think Elon Musk and the free speech thing, if we can take them at their word, that's what they want to see. But I think the reasons to be very worried are justified too. If we have tens or hundreds of millions of people convincing themselves of things that are not true, we end up in a situation where we have a gap between reality and humans' experience online. And I think that's not a good situation to be in, given the situations we're facing. How do you have reasoned political debate and elections if people are making lies about what's actually being discussed in that country?
I'm naturally a massive optimist, sometimes to my detriment.
The yin to my yang.
I mean, we talked about it earlier, that critical mass of social media. Like Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, they rely on people wanting to use their platforms. I am really hopeful that if they degrade the experience of social media to the point where it's harming people on a daily basis, I am so hopeful that people will just say, OK, well, we're not using your platforms anymore, and go somewhere else. And we end up back with an internet where different groups go to different places, like it was when we were in the Tumblr era of things, and you end up with a slightly splintered internet, but much less power consolidated within 3 companies.
Mickey, Tom, thanks very much indeed. And you can find much more from both of them on skynews.com. The Daily is back tomorrow.